Northeast Ohio, there's a big shopping center called Parmatown Mall. It's in the city of Parma. For some reason, despite the fact that I'm known in my geocaching group as the human GPS, I can find any place and anywhere. I cannot find Parmatown Mall. I don't know how many times I've been there since I was in college, but I just cannot figure out how to get there. I need that Google map to give me directions every time. And then my second example, when I started grad school, the first assignment I was given in my first engineering class when I was in grad school, granted, this was an undergraduate engineering class, so the hope was it wouldn't be too difficult, was literally to take a bunch of imaginary numbers and put them in polar form. And I kind of looked at that assignment and I was like, I don't get it. Mostly because I had been taught throughout all the calculus classes I had taken when I was an undergrad that when you see that little I, you square it so that you can get rid of it. So let's just say it was for me a very tough assignment to start out for grad school. So when we take the fact that we have knowledge gaps often don't make us feel that great. We really doubt ourselves. That imposter syndrome really sets in. When you take knowledge gaps and imposter syndrome, you get all those emojis that are the ones that very much depict the fact that you're scared, that you're really unsure of yourself, that you're sweating this out. So the best thing we can do when we get in this is try to figure out, how are we going to learn? How are we going to get past this? So for me with Apex, I mentioned again, this was several years ago, so I'm much more comfortable with my knowledge of maps now. But at that time, when I had to review code for other users, I pretty much tried to ignore or skip over any lines where it had maps. Not really a smart thing to do, but that's what I kind of did. I don't do that anymore, but at the time I did. So at that time, what did I know? I knew maps were key value pairs. And, in my head, okay, I've got a key, I've got a value, they go together. That key's unique. I saw these a lot when I was looking at triggers at the time. Now I see them at other things as well, but triggers were really common. And it was common to see it as an ID with the results of a query, usually in a list of some kind, or sometimes just as a record. But what I really wanted to know then was, how were these created? How do I actually get data in them? Could I use one myself? I'm reading plenty of code by other users. I haven't really written one myself. I had written one, but not, recently and not in a way that I really remembered. So I had to make a plan. And my plan to learn Apex maps involved creating rock, paper, scissors. Mostly because I was like, I think we could do this. I think I could use maps this way because it's kind of like a set of data and there's definitely things related to it. So I knew I was going to create a screen flow to play the game because I'm not trying to front end develop here. I was going to use Apex to pick the computer's choice, and obviously the player was going to choose theirs. I was going to use Apex to figure out who won. I knew that Apex would have to determine one who won, but what action did the weapon take? I don't want to just say, scissors beats rock. I wanted to say the scissors smashes the rock. The paper covers the rock, not just that we beat. That's not as fun. And of course, I was going to make sure I had test coverage by writing a good test class. So my journey started with some research, reading up on Apex maps. The link here, and while the slides aren't available, everything in the slides are available, and I'll be sharing a QR code at the end where you can access the documents if you want to take this journey yourself. But what I learned from reading Apex maps information, those keys and values can be of any data type. that could get pretty complex because I could have a key that's a map and a value that's a map, but we're not going to get that complex with this. Also, I had to note that if the key is a string, it's case sensitive. So rock with a capital R is not the same as rock with a lowercase r. That can also be pretty important. Overall, when I'm declaring it, it's a map with each of the two types in my little alligator greater than less than symbol. And there were some key methods that I wanted to make sure I understood. So put, which is how I'm going to add pairs, get, which returns the value based on the key set. So here's the list of all the keys. They're unique, but they're not ordered, so they're not alphabetical or anything fun like that. Values, if I wanted a list of all the values, size, how many pairs are there, is it empty? I mean, if you've reviewed code with maps in it, you're going to see is empty quite a lot, especially for checks before using a map, so that you don't get null value errors. Contains key, is this key even in the map, which returns a Boolean, as well as clear to remove all the pairs. I did not use all of these. The ones that are highlighted are the ones that I focused on. I don't even think I got to all of them when I was working on this originally, but since then I can tell you contains key is empty, put, get are the ones that I use the most often. So rock, paper, scissors, pretty typical game. Here's my listing of the weapons, who wins, who does this beat, and how do they win. So I knew I was going to need a map of a string and a list of strings to go with it based on that. And then as I was building this, not my first time building an Apex action for flow, but as usual, I had to keep some things in mind that I can only have one method in the class that can be invocable, as well as that my parameters always have to be in a list, both the parameters I pass to the action as well as the return. They have to be in a list, but it's okay. A list can have one thing in it, and I can live with that. So we get into the code. And right here was the start of what I did, and I'm actually going to get out of this and go into Dev Console so you can see where I started. So, Dev Console. When I started working on this, my first thing was, how am I going to choose what my choices are for the weapons? So I was creating my class. I created my first method, and it was going to be the get weapon choice. In this case, I was trying to figure out, what's the computer going to pick? They're going to randomly pick a weapon out of the 3 that are available. Let's throw that in a map and see if that works. So it does work. I can declare my map. I can, declare it the way it's meant to be declared with, in this case, it was an integer and a string. So I've got 1, 2, and 3. I have debug statements while the choice being made. So if my random isn't choosing correctly, so if it's choosing like a 0 for me, I'm making sure I'm still choosing until I get something between 1 and 3. So then I can use my get to get that key for that number and return the actual value, which is ultimately what I did here. However, really not efficient code. So in this case, map was not the right choice. But it taught me a lot of things. Like it taught me, how do I get values in map? How do I get back the value of that key? So it was useful, but I mean, 20 lines, give or take, to pick a weapon seemed a little much. So kind of started over. And this time when I started over, I decided we're going to let the computer just choose the weapon out of the list. Makes it a lot cleaner, a lot easier. And it's okay that we're not using map in this case. But for the next part, let's make that map we talked about with all the weapons And the first time I tried it, I literally declared my map. I created lists of what was going to be the rules for the rock, the paper, the scissors, and I used put statements to put them in. All fine and dandy, but as you can see, that is 7 lines of code. Can we make that shorter? Can we be a little more efficient with our space? Granted, lines of code really not a big deal in most orgs, but efficiency is great. Learning ways to be efficient is also great. So, did some more research and learned that I could, in my map declaration, I could actually put my values in right away. Um, in this case, the syntax requires I identify the key. I use this equal arrow kind of looking thing. It's the equal greater than symbol to then say what's the value related to that. In this case, since my value is a list, I had to declare that new list and populate it, just like I would with a list. So I kind of combined some steps there. Again, this is really personal preference as well as readability. And then I get my game pieces. So I've got all the weapons that are available. I've got, what they beat, how they beat it, and we're good for that. Then I said, all right, I need to determine who beats who. So I'm going to send it a piece. I'm going to send it information about what weapon was chosen, and I'm going to say, hey, who can you beat? So really, what I'm getting is I'm sending it get beats who. So I'm going to send it say rock, and I'm going to expect it to return to me scissors because rock beats scissors. So for that, I'm declaring a map. I'm using that make weapons to populate that map so that I don't have to do that multiple times. And then I'm saying, hey, for this game piece, use the game piece that I sent you in this class and tell me what that first value is in that string. So who is the beater, and return that. I do the exact same thing for the how, for the, is it covers, is it smashes? Only in this case, from that list, I'm returning what is the second element. Most of us remember lists are numbered starting with 0 and move on from there. And then finally, I get into the actual play of the game with my invocable method. So this is where my method is invocable. And as I mentioned, I have to take in a string. In this case, my string is the player's choice because, that's what I've done. I've chosen who the player is. The computer hasn't chosen yet in my game. And when I return, I'm going to return a list string because that's what Apex requires. So that's going to be the result. So my computer makes its choice using that method we used with the list. Check for a tie game because that's the easiest one to check for. If the computer and I check the same thing, it's a tie game, we're done. So I can add that result and say, hey, we both chose this piece. It's a tie game, we're done. Then on my else condition, I can see, hey, who do I beat? So if I send the player's choice, and remember, because it's a list, I have to, even though it's a list of 1, I have to send it with the first one. So I'm calling that get b2 method that I created. So if I chose scissors, the answer to this question is paper, and I'm comparing paper to what the computer chose. And if the computer chose paper, I won, and that's the message it's going to give me. It's going to give me the fact that I chose scissors. I'm going to pull from that beats how for scissors, it's cuts. And I'm going to give it the computer's choice. So I get that statement, you won because scissors cuts paper. And then my last check is going to be obviously the fact that the computer won. And the computer won because its choice, and again, getting the how the beats based on the computer's choice, whatever my choice was, and I'm going to return that result. Really nothing hard here. This is only one way to write rock, paper, scissors. If you've ever done it in other languages, there are always different options to write this game. In fact, if I were to write it now, I probably would not write it the same way, but it's, it's a fun exercise. How many different ways can you write rock, paper, scissors if you really want to? So that's our main class. And of course, we had to create a test class because, wouldn't be the programmer I am unless I'm also creating my test class. And in this, because I left each of my methods as public, I did test each method. So I tested am I getting a choice? And is that choice within the original list options that I want to have? I'm kind of testing the who be to, making sure I get the result I expect to have based on what gets sent, as well as the how. And then finally, I have three random iterations of the game. So, I basically make my choice, one of each weapon. I run it through the gameplay, and I make sure that at least I get back a result. Not ideal for a test class, but since I'm dealing with a little bit of randomness, it's a little hard to specify that. So, let's see, do I have it? Yeah. So when I run my test, you can see that because I'm dealing with randomness, sometimes some of the choices don't get chosen for me to actually be able to see. So in this case, when it ran each time, the computer won for 3 choices. If I set up more tests in there, maybe eventually it'll hit it. I don't know if that's worth it. 93%, definitely higher than 75. But I love to be at 100%, yes, but we're okay. I was okay with this. So back to our slides. So we coded, wrote our code. Quick recap on the code, random weapon selection, map was overkill. Easier just to use the list, especially since we're only listing, choosing one thing out of a bunch of choices. We made our weapons map. We get which chosen weapon can beat. We can get how the chosen weapon wins. So what's that action? We bring it all together. We got code coverage at 93%. Good enough for most things. We're ready to move on. So moving on was obviously the screen flow. Screen flow in this case is fairly simple. Has 3 parts: a screen, our apex action, and then a final screen. So I'm gonna take us to that in the org. And yeah, I took the screenshots from here, so it should look exactly like this unless it's decided to reorg on me. So my lines aren't quite as straight. So my first screen was really simple. Just, a statement, let's play. And then, so just the display text formatted so it's, not as plain as normal text. You can do whatever you want here. And no, I did not get into the adding pictures. That would be definitely a fun thing to do. And then pick my weapon, and I just decided to use a simple pick list. I declared each of the choices that were available. So I actually created those as text choices so that my user could only pick from those. So there's no chance they're going to pick one that's outside the range because they can't type anything in. So pretty simple there. And then for the apex action, when I added it, I had to put in what's the weapon choice they're going to use. So I definitely wanted to include and send them that item. And it's okay that this is really a single item. It's going to treat it like it's a list. So it accepted it. And then for my output, I'm going to make sure I put that output into something, in this case, game result. So I'll be able to use it. So I did want to manually assign that to a variable. And then finally, my screen to show the results, which really just has a display text that is that value of the game result. Since I made it a nice sentence, so I didn't have to worry about pulling parts out of it. So pretty simple flow, nothing too complex. Obviously, as we mentioned, the first screen, the user selects their weapon. Then we have the apex action that runs the code and stores the result. And then we finally show the result. So all that built, before I get to the slide, probably should see it in action. So we have our fun little RPS thing on this homepage, and one of my little practice orgs that I use. And so I just need to pick my weapon, and I like to pick scissors and hit next. And in this case, the computer won because rock smashed my scissors. And I could play a couple times if I wanted to. Could either keep checking the same thing. Oh, tie game. See if we choose paper, if we can get a win out of this. Nope. So they chose scissors. One of these times I will actually win.
Yeah, let's beat that computer at least once.
I beat the computer. So paper covers rock. So, and of course, you know, like any good rock, paper, scissors enthusiast, I couldn't stop with just rock, paper, scissors. I had to do rock, paper, scissors, lizard, Spock. So, you know, down here, I could choose lizard. And in this case, we both chose lizard. And I'll show you that code in a moment. And it doesn't just pick lizard, I promise. Yeah, you won because lizard poisoned Spock. So in this case, for switching over to rock, paper, scissors, lizard, Spock, I couldn't exactly use the same code. A little bit different on the code, but not too different. Obviously, my choice for the computer now had to include 2 more options. So I just had to extend my list. And of course, my math equation to take advantage of the fact that there are 5. My Who Beats Who now actually has 2 choices. So instead of a, notice I don't have the create the weapons piece anymore. I literally just have the who beats and the beats how, because this is getting a little more complicated. I have, in each case, I have 2 weapons that each weapon beats. So I needed to kind of keep that, to keep it as a list. Could probably have gotten more complex if I wanted to, you know, had a string to a map, and in that map had strings to strings. But we're gonna keep it simple. And so we declared the whole thing out so that, you know, if we chose rock, we would get back scissors and lizard. So as long as scissors or lizard was in there, we'd know we beat it. And then the how. So in this case, we're going to use that list of strings right here, and we're going to return how it's beat. So if I have rock and someone else chose lizard, I'm going to crush them. You know, whereas obviously rock to scissors was smashes. And it has all the different choices in this case. And then my gameplay is again fairly similar, except that in this case, you know, again, I'm checking for my tie game. My computer's made my choice since it's the choice that I made. The first thing is I'm checking the who beats. So I'm setting it my choice. I'm seeing if it contains, which, you know, contains great way to use this rather than having to
like iterate.
Yes, rather than having to do a whole lot of if statements, I can just say, hey, is it in there? And then again, using my get beats how to return what the result was, doing the same for the computer win. So very similar concept, and test classes were also similar, and I haven't run them recently. So not.
At this point, the data structure is pretty much a matrix, right?
So I'm still sticking with the same Apex class structure. I'm actually using 2 different ones here. In one case, I'm going from a single string to a list, and the other I'm going from a list to a single string, rather than doing a full out map that uses maps as the values. But that's another way I could have done it, or I could pursue that as part of my next learning. So speaking of next learning, I never stop, just so you're aware. If you see my trail head count, I'm constantly working on the badges, have most of them, just waiting for the next ones to come out, and to finish the LWC one, maybe someday. But what other things could I do with this? So one, I could handle, error handling. What if someone chose spatula? Not really a choice in the rock, paper, scissors game or the rock, paper, scissors, lizard, Spock game. So I could utilize the contains key method to see if it's within my keys. So I could add that in. Um, Instead of creating that list, I could actually have my weapon choices created and use key set and say, hey, randomly pick one of the items from the key set. Might have to be a little bit different though, because order is a different deal when you're using key set. I could update my flow, add some images, definitely add some visual appeal. Could try, see if I could improve that code coverage. 93% is good, but it's still not 100. But with random, makes it a little tougher. Create, of course, some documentation. And, I could do an LWC instead for the UI. Get myself some practice with some JavaScript. Probably could just do rock, paper, scissors in JavaScript to begin with as well, too, rather than using an Apex class. But, just different ways to pursue more learning. So yeah, we already talked about the rock, paper, scissors, lizard, Spock. And of course, besides the changing the code, also having to modify the flow to have those additional choices. So I'm going to open the floor to questions. This QR code will actually take you to documents that have instructions if you want to create rock, paper, scissors or rock, paper, scissors, lizard, Spock. It's just a website where I keep documents from presentations.
Awesome. That was really cool, Lynda. If anybody has questions, again, feel free to write it in the chat or unmute yourselves. I had no clue you were going to go with rock, paper, scissors, lizard, Spock. I thought I was going just to joke about it, like, oh yeah, you should do that next. But yeah, you've already done it.
I had to. My other favorites, though, so I'm actually doing a rock, paper, scissors lesson with my Girls Who Code Club in October. They'll have the options to write it in Scratch, Python, or JavaScript. So, being able to do a program in multiple languages, I know we all usually start off with Hello World, and you learn that in every language you learn. But also being able to do something a little more complex like rock, paper, scissors in multiple languages is always great. Great practice. When the girls do this, they have their choice of rock, paper, scissors, or I think it's cowboy, ninja, bear, or fire, water, snowflake. So definitely there are different options out there.
No, those I've never heard.
They are kind of fun. There is a non-code version for Cowboy Ninja Bear that has full body movement. It's lots of fun.
Curious, for the folks joining us, does this schedule work for most people?
Cool. So before we cut out and give you back some time, announcements, upcoming events, I always end with this. So, if you're job seeking or hiring, always feel free to let us know. We can post in our Trailblazer community. Sadly, though, we do try to keep that Trailblazer community group for the Cleveland devs to local people. So local stuff around Cleveland. Just kind of something we want to do to help foster this community. There is Cleveland Salesforce Saturdays, most Saturday mornings at 9 a.m. Travels around a little bit because, I need some variety in my coffee shops. This coming Saturday, I believe I will be at the Coffee Club, which is in Broadview Heights on Royalton Road. You're welcome to join me. I'll be working on LWC Specialist Super Badge, but feel free to show up, work on whatever you like. Bring your questions. I can be distracted from LWC Super Badge really well, really easily. And then for our next dev group, we're looking for feedback about what you thought about this, doing a lunchtime session and, having a kind of more fun, less serious topic. If there are other people who want to present something like that, I know there are a couple of people I want to reach out to the community who've done some fun stuff. Also trying to convince my daughter she should present about the role-playing game character creation she created using Flow.
Yeah, definitely. If any of you have a topic that you're passionate about and you'd like to share it, that'd be awesome.
Even if it's just something small you built, we'd love, the group would love to hear. And, maybe what you built or the things you experienced in building that will resonate with them or help them even, make their jobs easier or avoid pitfalls.
Yeah, totally. And even if you have something and you think that it's not long enough for a full session, we can put together a handful of smaller presentations and have a session together. Like, I don't know if any of you remember those like lightning talks, like something very short and to the point. But yeah, we'd love to have more